Friends, if you're in a market for an actually affordable high-end gaming laptop, this might be for you. What we have here is the WootBook Ultra 3, courtesy of Wootware in South Africa, who sent it over for me to review and for me to give away as part of our charity stream that we did. This laptop is packed to the gills with specs and features, but it also comes in at a really compelling price point that makes it absolutely worth the consideration. So one lucky viewer actually ended up winning this bad boy, but we're gonna go over all the details and specs and why it makes sense as a legitimate consideration for you, even if you don't live in South Africa where Wootware is. So let's go over the specs of the WootBook first so that you have an understanding of what we're dealing with. We've got a Ryzen 9 5900HX 8-core 16-thread processor with 3.3 gigahertz base and 4.6 gigahertz boost. The specific model that we're giving away is kitted out with 32 gigabytes of DDR4 3200 megahertz RAM, although it has 2 slots and you can fill that with whatever you want. It has a 2 terabyte NVMe 3.0 SSD on the inside. It has 2 NVMe slots so that you can fit it out with whatever you want. Specifically, the GPU is the RTX 3070 8 gigabytes GDDR6, but it's the 115 watt TDP model, which makes it one of the higher end ones you can get in a laptop. It also has a Wi-Fi 6 AX200 chip with Bluetooth 5.2, a Realtek ALC 256 audio codec, and a 6-cell 91.2 watt-hour battery, which actually resulted in some pretty good battery life. And it's all powered by a 230 watt power adapter. This thing honestly is a beast, and I haven't even talked about the display yet, which rounds it out to be a really good on-the-go gaming and productivity device, because this is a 15.6 inch 1440p 165 hertz 100% sRGB 350 nits IPS panel. That's basically every spec sheet that I could possibly want in a gaming laptop. It has IPS and 350 nits, which makes it better than a lot of other gaming laptops that are out there, and 1440p 165 hertz means that it's good for gaming, but it also has 100% sRGB coverage, which means that it's color accurate as well. So you get all of those specs, plus you get an optomechanical keyboard that also has some RGB, which you can turn off if that's not your style, but it both types really well and sounds really good. It's not a very loud, clacky mechanical keyboard. It's just a nice, satisfying one that you can listen to here. The only gripe that I have with this keyboard is just like a couple other laptops that I've checked out. It forces in the 10 key at the very edge, but it doesn't do it as a full 10 key. It only does it as a 3-column setup instead of a 4-column setup, which throws off my muscle memory, which I'm not a fan of. I'd rather it be left out as opposed to having it only half implemented, but it's gonna be up to personal preference whether or not you enjoy that. But rounding out the rest of the spec sheet, it's honestly as good as you're gonna need it to be. Speakers are 2x2 watts. They come across perfectly loud, a little lacking in bass response, and slightly bright, but sounds good enough for you to use it whenever you're just not plugged in with a headset. For speaking of headset, you actually have a dedicated port for both headphone and microphone on the left-hand side, which also on that left, you got a Kensington lock and a USB 3.0 10 gigabit per second port. On the right-hand side, you have the SD card UHS 1 reader and 2 USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type A ports. On the back, yes, there's still more. You have the power input, 2.5 gigabit port, HDMI 2.1, and a USB-C 3.2 port, which is also capable of doing DisplayPort, so it's great to round out to be a really good home station as well in case you want to plug in displays. In case you need to be doing video calls for work, it has a 720p webcam and microphone, which you can take a look at here. The webcam's only 720p, but under good lighting, it actually comes across pretty decent. This is the exact same set that I was just filming the rest of the video on, so I think this is going to be passable for anybody who needs to use it for video calls. The microphone does a pretty decent job of removing background noise. I've got a furnace going right now to heat my house since it's currently 32 degrees outside, but you can't really hear that coming across, and the microphone quality is pretty good. It also has an IR camera that makes it Windows Hello compatible, so you get all of the feature set with the webcam setup that you would need for just remote productivity. So it has the makings of being a really great powerhouse laptop, and the build quality on this is tremendously solid. There's very little flex in the chassis, if any at all. The keyboard doesn't flex down at all. There's hardly any screen wobble when it comes to pushing. This is a tremendously well-built laptop, which is something that I've come to expect from the Wootware WootBooks. But all of those specs would be kind of meaningless if it didn't have the performance to back it up, which thankfully it does. So let's go ahead and take a look at its gaming performance at 1440p high settings, which is normally not something I test laptops at. I usually go for a 1080p setup. But because this is an RTX 3070 and it's a 1440p screen at 165 Hz, it just made the most sense to do that. But also we're gonna compare this against a desktop that had a 10700KF plus an RTX 3070 that we also built to give away for the charity stream that we did, which is the Snow PC build you can check out right up there. So let's take a look at the numbers. Red Dead Redemption 2, we averaged 51.7 FPS. You're gonna need to drop that to medium in order to hit that 60 FPS average, and that's about 33% slower than the desktop 3070. In Fortnite, we managed 88.3 FPS, which is about half the performance that we got out of the desktop chip. Cyberpunk 2077, we averaged 41.9, which is again a third lower. Crysis Remastered, we averaged 66.3 FPS. Metro Exodus, we averaged 56.9. Witcher 3 was 75.6, which is down 38% from the desktop. Assassin's Creed Valhalla, we managed 51.3. Control, we managed 55.5. And Resident Evil Village, we managed 115.5, with it being 46% of the desktop performance. Those percentage points being lower makes a lot of sense. Laptops aren't exactly one-to-one the performance scale of the desktop variant, especially with NVIDIA rolling out multiple different versions of their RTX 30 series laptop graphics cards. But this one does put up a mighty fine performance, especially being in such a portable form factor. And it's not tremendously hot either. The GPU never went above 74 degrees Celsius in all of our testing and averaged 72. The CPU was a little warmer, that 5900HX needing a little bit more to cool, staying at roughly 95 degrees the entire time that we were testing. But as far as CPU performance though, the 5900HX does really well, especially against that i7-10700KF in the Snow PC build. Checking out Cinebench R23, the multi-core performance of the 5900HX was roughly 12% slower than the i7, but the single core performance was roughly 7% faster. So single threaded applications doing really well on the 5900HX, and it also being in a portable form factor, losing 12% on multi-core honestly isn't all that bad. As far as battery life goes, this thing actually does really well. As I mentioned in the spec list, it has a 92 watt-hour battery, which helps it deliver 5 hours of battery life in my testing, which is as good as I've seen in really high-end laptops. I've gotten better battery life when it comes to just being an APU, but the fact that this is a high-end 8-core 16-thread processor that can manage 5 hours in my battery life test is pretty great. Compare that to the ROG Flow that I recently reviewed, which had the 5900HS. That thing had an abysmal battery life of 3 hours and 10 minutes. Part of that is because it only had a 61 watt-hour battery because it was in a 13-inch laptop, so the benefit of having a 15-inch laptop is that you can fit more watt-hours in there, but it does seem like the WootBook performs much better overall when it comes to just being unplugged from the power adapter. So specs, as far as a laptop, really good. I got the performance I was expecting out of it. The thermals were altogether acceptable, but really where this laptop shines is when it comes to price. Just talking about it over in South Africa right now, and then I'll bring this back to US pricing. This thing cost as spec 39,275 Rand, which is roughly $2,650. You can't one-to-one convert that because there are import fees in South Africa. They pay a lot more for electronics than we do here in the US. It was something that I really struggled with during my entire time living there. But when you compare that to direct competitors with the exact same spec sheet, in fact, you can't really get the same spec sheet, this thing is tremendously priced. If we look at the Gigabyte X1, that's 42,000 Rand, 3,000 Rand more, but it only has 16 gigs of RAM and a 512 gig hard drive, as opposed to the 32 gigs and 2 terabytes that's in this machine, and it also has a chiclet keyboard with only a 1080p 144 hertz screen. So it's missing a lot of the features that this thing has, but it's priced more expensively. And then adding in something like the ROG Scar 17-inch, that thing starts at 50,000 Rand. It has the same 32 gigs of RAM, only has a 1 terabyte hard drive, but has a 1080p 300 hertz screen, which I'm not going to argue which is better, 1080p 300 versus 1440p 165. But again, it starts at 50,000 Rand, which is hundreds of dollars more expensive. So if you're in South Africa, Wootware's WootBooks make a lot of sense financially. Not only are they built well, but they perform well, and they have Wootware's customer service behind them, which they were a big channel sponsor for the longest time. However, if you're in the US or in the EU, you can actually still purchase this laptop. It's just listed under different names because they use the ODM Tongfang to make these laptops. And you can find this in the XMG Neo 15, where it starts at 2,200 euro, or you can get the Electronics Mech 15 G3 for $1,900 on Amazon right now. And as far as I'm aware, it's the exact same specs, exact same build quality, because it's the Tongfang GM5ZG7W 5900H, which means it's the Ryzen version because there is an Intel version. But at $1,900, you're getting a heck of a laptop for that, even in the US. The best competitors that I could find was something like the Prometheus 17, but while that has roughly all of the same specs and comes in about $100 cheaper, it only has a 65 watt-hour battery, so it's not quite as good. Then you have something like the ROG Strix G17, which again, spec sheet puts it really close to what this Wootware WootBook is, but it's a chiclet keyboard instead of the mechanical one, and it's 17 inches as opposed to the 15-inch one. And so while you can get close to what the Wootware WootBook offers in some of the competitors, you don't get everything that the WootBook has. Not the spec sheet that it has, not that 1440p 165 hertz screen, nor the mechanical keyboard that's in here. So whether it's South Africa, the US, or the EU, this laptop makes a lot of sense if you're looking to get the best bang for buck out of a high-end gaming / productivity laptop, and you don't want to necessarily go cheap. You're not cheapening out on anything here by going for the lower priced version. This thing is solidly built, it just doesn't have a huge brand name behind it like Asus or Dell, etc. So it will depend on where you're getting it from for customer service in case anything happens to break, because laptops do break. But I know after the many years that I've worked with Wootware, their customer service is second to none. So I'd be fully confident buying this from them in South Africa. Not exactly sure of electronics repair process when it comes to buying their stuff on Amazon, but after seeing how well constructed this laptop is, its feature set, how well it performs, how hot it doesn't get, I'm a huge fan of this one. So I'll leave links in the video description for you to check this out, whether it's in the EU, the US, or more specifically for Wootware and the WootBooks in South Africa. I can't recommend this highly enough. I'm super excited for the person who won this because they are getting a tremendously great laptop that they'll be able to use in any scenario possible. Let me know what you think of the Wootware WootBook Ultra 3 down below in the comments. I'd love to hear from you down there. And with that being said, I'm Brett with the UFD Tech Channel. I'll see you in the next video, friends. Cheers.